Hey, how's everyone tonight?
Great.
Good. We've got a few people on here. So to get started here, if you want to, if you can, type in the comments or in the chat section, type where you're from. I do know a few faces on here, so I know Roger and I know Chantel, my friend Chantel's on here, and yeah. So right where where in Canada or where in the world are you? So if you put it in the chat, let me know there. Perfect. We'll just wait a couple more minutes. We've had a fair chunk of people join. So, okay. South of Madden. Oh, south of Madden. You are not too far from where I grew up. So that's pretty cool. Calgary, Bashaw, Edmonton, south of Edmonton. Hey, cool. So I grew up south of Madden. So I grew up west of Airdrie. And so my parents had a 26,000 square foot greenhouse west of Airdrie. Um, so for the Madden person, oh, Olds, you're my neighbor. I'm in Olds, Alberta now. So if you go west of Airdrie and go north of the rodeo grounds, that's where I grew up. And so my parents had a 26,000 square foot greenhouse. They grew long English cucumbers. They made a great living at it, raised their 6 kids. I grew up working on a little farm there. Cool. So welcome here, everyone. We got a few more coming in here. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have been to a master class before, but I'm here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. Okay, Tanya, you're on 11 acres. Perfect. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself, who I am, what I do, where I got my experience. It's the School of Hard Knocks. And then we'll get into some tips and tricks about gardening. Now, one thing I do love to do when I do master classes like this is I actually love to be very interactive. And so if you ever have a question, put it in the chat and I try and keep up with it as best I can. If you have a question on topic for what I'm talking about, put it in the chat then. If not, I'll reserve about 15 minutes at the end for questions. And so at the end of this, I've also got an offer for you if anyone is interested. Okay, perfect. So I want to start off by telling you who I am. So I'm Dawn. I'm 45 years old and I have 40 years of vegetable growing experience, which sounds crazy, but I was raised on a vegetable farm, like I said, west of Airdrie. And my parents had grew long English cucumbers. They also grew a few tomatoes. They did bedding out plants. And so I was raised working in the greenhouse. And then, oh, perfect, south of Saskatoon. Nice. I was just in Saskatoon a couple weeks ago. So they had that greenhouse, and in 2006, they sold their greenhouse, and myself and my ex-husband built our greenhouse. And so our greenhouse was east of Didsbury. We built a 36,000 square foot greenhouse, which is just shy of 1 acre. And our plan was to do long English cucumbers and sell them to the warehouse, just like my parents had. And we got into it and we realized very quickly that that was not going to work. Prices had gone up, inflation, our mortgage was bigger. The cost of doing business was a lot higher, and the price of a dozen cucumbers back when my parents was selling cucumbers, it was $7 a dozen to the warehouse. And so at $7 a dozen to the warehouse with even bigger expenses just wasn't going to pencil out. And so eventually I started doing farmers markets, selling at farmers markets. So, and I realized the very first farmers market I went to, and we had a few tomatoes that we grew in the greenhouse just for fun. And people really, really, really liked my tomatoes. Roger, do you remember my tomatoes?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Were they good? I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry, Roger. Okay, so I grew some tomatoes and yeah, thanks, Roger. So I grew some tomatoes, and people really liked them. And so then eventually I started growing cucumbers, tomatoes, and peppers, going to farmers markets and selling those. And I looked outside into the field because we had a quarter section of land at that point, and I thought, man, we're just renting that out to the neighbor to put grain crop in. Why don't we grow some garden as well? So we started the first year with 1 acre of garden, and so I planted potatoes and carrots and onions and beets and zucchini and squash and whole. It's actually shorter to tell you what I didn't grow than what I did grow. And we did a whole acre of garden. And my ex-mother-in-law, she looked out the window at that point in time, and she said to my ex-husband at that point, she said, wow, that's a lot of garden. What are you going to do if it doesn't work? And my ex-husband just said, no, no, no. What's she going to do? Meaning me. What is she going to do next year if it does work? And so I went from 1 acre of garden to 3 acres of garden to 6 acres of garden to 10 acres of garden to 20 acres of garden. So eventually I had a 36,000 square foot greenhouse, 20 acres of garden. I was selling it all mostly at farmers markets, directly to consumers, directly to customers. And I employed, well, by the time in 2020, I had 2 different store locations. I ran my own farmers market. I had my big farm. And yeah, I did $2.5 million in farm to table sales that year. So that's where my experience comes from. And yeah, it's the school of hard knocks. So I know what not to do. And I also know what to do now. So that's why I'm here. Since then, I had to unfortunately sell my farm in 2023 was my last growing season. I had to sell it. Farming, your margins are really tight. I just couldn't make it anymore. And so I sold the farm, and now I'm teaching. And so I've actually got a little teaching job at Olds College and teaching online there and teaching people just like you. And I've got a coaching business, teaching people how to do gardening and how to do small business and things like that. I'll just tell you one more thing. So this is I was the 2019 vegetable grower of the year in Alberta. And so I was given that award. And it says for my enterprising spirit and growing my business into a consumer destination. So yeah, pretty proud of that as well. So yeah, we're here to chat about gardening. I think most of us are in Canada, so that's a great start. So that's a little bit of my background. So we're here to talk about gardening and vegetables. So I want to talk about why this really matters. Now, I don't want to talk too much about politics. I do talk a lot about politics on my social media, but I don't want to get too much into it here. But food prices are rising. And with the gas prices going the way they are in Canada right now, with our political system globally, I really strongly feel that this is the year. If you haven't planted a garden, or if you haven't planted a significant garden, I think this year would be the year that you really want to, just because it takes you for food security and your food system back into your own hands to some degree. Depending on the size of space you have, you can grow a whole lot. Back, if you think about like going backwards in time, back into like the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, everyone had a garden. Everyone had a few chickens in their backyard. Everyone was growing something. And if you had something extra, you could, trade with your neighbors and things like that, give things away. I was in Kelowna a couple of years ago, and I saw a big zucchini sitting on an electrical box. And I thought that is where our food system needs to go, so that we all have something extra so that we can share with one another. And zucchini is one of those things that you ring the doorbell and run away and leave your big zucchinis on your neighbor's porch. And so yeah, I think our food system is really, really, really important, and you want to control your food. So I'm going to show or talk about some tips and tricks on how to grow food in the space you have this year. And so depending on the space you have, you can grow a little bit or you can grow a lot. But everyone, even if you live in a apartment building, in a balcony, you can grow something in your backyard. So the first thing I want to talk about is where to get good seeds. So I hope you all got pen and paper because you can take some notes. And so my favorite places to get seeds is I actually really like West Coast Seeds. They're a Canadian company. And so they're a really good one. So here's a West Coast seed packet here. And then I also like, I don't know that I have any here. I really like William Dam seeds. So, oh yeah, I do. Here we go. Here's some cabbage. So these are some old seeds, but we'll talk about that in a second. So this is William Dam. So William Dam's out of Ontario. They're a Dutch company. I'm Dutch background, so I'm a little biased to that. But yeah, I really like William Dam West Coast seeds. I have, so you can find the Mackenzie seeds in lots of places and lots of little stores. These seeds are actually treated seeds. So that means they've got a fungicide. I think it's fungicide on there. Um, most seeds are untreated. West Coast seeds are mostly untreated. That's why I really like them. So West Coast seeds, but Mackenzie seeds are okay if you get them in. So you want to make sure that you get new seeds. See how this one had December 2022. So when I had my big farm, I bought new seeds every year. So I actually have 4 Rubbermaid tubs full of seeds out in a shed, and I'm keeping them myself. I'm keeping them just for like doomsday prepping. Hopefully I will never need them, but I always buy new seeds because if you keep your seeds over year, sometimes your germination rate lowers. And so I always just went ahead, bought new seeds. Because if you think about it, like in this package of cabbage, like there's however many cabbage seeds in here. So I don't even know. I planted some. Oh, there's piles. There's probably like 50 cabbage seeds in there. You can't see them. There's probably like 50 cabbage seeds in there. And this little package doesn't have the price on it. But like this little package of cilantro, if you see this package of cilantro, this package of cilantro is $3.49. And the amount of seed that you can get out of this, or the amount of cilantro that you can get out of this, if it germinates and grow, like one bunch is $3.49. But you're going to not need to buy cilantro all summer if you keep cutting it and cutting it and cutting it. And then eventually it turns into coriander. And so you can harvest the seeds. And actually, cilantro is one of the things that you can save seed on very easily. Beans are really easy to save seed on. Here's some peas. So again, if you think of the amount of peas you get for a little pea package, this one's $6.49. Broccoli, piles and piles and piles of broccoli for $6.29. So that's like two heads of broccoli right there. And you get so many if you can actually get the production out of it. Now, there's a question. Did you ever let some of your veggies go to seed and collect my own? I never did, just because it was easier for me to buy new seed, but you can. And again, I've thought about that. So a friend of mine, she used to, I've seen her collect her beans. So beans are really easy to do. So what you do is you pick your beans, and you let some of your beans grow, like overgrow and grow really thick and big. And then she dried them out and then she planted them the next year. Peas would work the same. Cilantro is really easy. Lettuce, if you let it go to seed, it can you can get seed off of it. Now, beets, I think we're getting into territory that I don't know 100%, so I'll just put that little disclaimer in here. But I think beets, carrots, I know for sure. How you get seed from them is you actually have to overwinter them. So you have to cover them with lots and lots of good straw so they don't totally like freeze solid. And then you have to let them grow the second year. And the second year is actually where you get the seed from. So, but yeah, potatoes are really easy to keep. So you dig your potatoes and then you hold potatoes over the winter, and then you always plant those potatoes. So I know we didn't often buy seed potatoes. We always, well, on my farm I did, but I bought it by the skidful. But when we had a small personal garden, yeah, we always used the leftover potatoes that were going to seed for the next year. Yeah, so that's a little bit about seeds. Yeah, same thing here. Winter squash. Here's a package of winter squash. It doesn't have the price on it. Oh no, it says $27, but still, like there is piles and piles and piles of seed in this package, and there is a whole lot of food. If you plant this and you let it grow, there's a whole lot of food here. So, yeah, pretty cool to get food, to think that you can get lots of food. So the next thing I want to talk about is the best bang for your buck. So I've had people come to me and they said, "Oh, we grew peppers," and I'd say, "Ooh, that's maybe not your best option," because a pepper plant. When I had my farm, my peppers were seeded in November. I got them in January, and I didn't see a colored pepper until late April, early May, and or maybe March, April, somewhere in there. So it took about 5 months to get one colored pepper. And so when you think of that, if you're using your space in your little greenhouse, you can plant some if you want to. I'm not saying you can't, but if you're going for food production, if you use that same space and you plant tomatoes, let's say, you're gonna get way more tomatoes than you will peppers. Or pole beans, let's say. Pole beans are one of my favorites, especially being creative on the south side of your house. They're a warm weather crop. And so if you plant them on the south side of your house, you're gonna have these big bean plants grow up, and you're going to get piles and piles and piles of beans. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a girl, and she said that she grew pole beans on her balcony in the city of Calgary, and she had so much bean production that she didn't even know what to do with them. And so pole beans are one of my favorites to just get production. Let me think. I kind of skipped over something. Oh, let's go back to seeds, actually. Sorry. So if you're in Alberta or if you're in Canada here, because I don't think we have anyone from the States right now, you're going to want to also read on your seed packages the dates to maturity. So if you read here, they have, it says on here usually 100 to 120 days. That's long. So if you think in Canada, zone 3, your first frost is usually, or your last frost is usually June 1st was one kind of when I usually kind of called myself in the clear. And then sometimes we got frost in September. So that's June, July, August. So 3 months. So 90 days, frost-free days. So this is some spaghetti squash, and it's 90 days. So there you go. And so what I would do is I would start my seedlings inside. Let's chat about that. I'm not really going off my notes here. Sorry. I'm just kind of going squirrely, but I less is more. This is something to think about when you're starting plants. Less is more. So the only thing, we're in March right now, the only thing I would have seeded is I would maybe start some Brussels sprouts right now. Onions, I actually would have seeded probably a month ago or 2 months ago. And tomatoes, I would probably seed coming up. Peppers, if you wanted peppers, I would have seeded them probably a month ago as well, because they're a very long crop. But other than that, less is more, because when you think of transplanting, so some people start really early. So if you planted these spaghetti squash, let's say, and you planted them now, by the time you go to transplant them in June, these spaghetti squash are going to be like this big. And so that's getting into a bigger plant. Whereas if you have a plant like this and you're transplanting that out, a littler plant can handle the transplant a bit easier. It's going to be less hard on their system. So I always like, it's a little bit morbid, but I always think about, if you take a 2-year-old and you throw them outside in the cold overnight, they're probably going to be able to bounce back a little bit easier. But if you take a senior citizen and throw them outside overnight, that's really going to wreak havoc on them. So that's why you want to transplant your transplants out. And so Brussels sprouts, this is a 100-day growing, 100 to 120 day. So you want to make sure that you get those planted just a little bit earlier. They're a little bit slower, and then transplant them out June 1st or after your frost-free days. Watch your weather. And then Brussels sprouts, here's a little tidbit about Brussels sprouts. They can handle up to -8 once they're fully grown. So they're a pretty cool crop. They're in the brassica family, so they're going to get those cabbage worms. And so your Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, kale, they're in the brassica family, and so you're going to struggle with the cabbage moth. Okay, I'm going to see about going back to my my notes. I was talking about what was I talking? I don't even remember what I was talking about when I went back to the seeds. Transplants. Not sure. I'll just skip on to the next thing. So when you think of, I want to talk about this, warm weather crops versus cool weather crops. So your cool weather crops are your lettuce, kale, spinach, arugula, any of your leafy greens. They are going to go really well on the north side of your house. So they need less sunshine and they'll do a little bit better in the shade. But your warm weather crops and the things that are going to need the most sunshine and the most the most heat units are corn, tomatoes, squash, beans are a warm weather crop. Peas are actually a cool weather crop. Cabbage is a cool weather crop. Broccoli is a cool weather crop. And so you're going to want to think about warm weather crops versus cool weather crops and where you're going to put them in your yard. And so when you think of if a lot of you probably live in town, if you've got beds and things like that, if you have garden boxes, I find that sometimes things don't always grow the best in the garden boxes, especially root crops, because they sometimes get a little bit extra warm, and so they don't grow super great. Okay, so let's talk about spacing. So you want to make the very most of your space, and so you want to think of vertical space as well as your space that you have down here. So I was actually in Olds last spring, a lady hired me to come and just show her where to put things and talk about her yard and things like that. And I said, well, have you ever thought of growing anything on the front side of your house in your front yard? And she's like, no, I never have. And I said, that's actually where I would grow, because she was facing west. And so it got the most sunshine during the day. I said, I would actually grow some pole beans right up the front of your house. And she said, oh, I've only ever done flowers in the front of my house. And I said, yeah, but you may as well make the most of your space and use it to the best of your abilities. And so she did. She grew some pole beans up there. She grew some tomatoes in the front of her house. She grew some potatoes in amongst some of her flowers in her flower beds. And so she just made the most of her space. And so, yeah, sorry, that was a phone call and I just ignored it. Okay, so when I think of a garden, so I'll just show you how I did my big garden. If I can find my felt pen. You'd laugh at me if you saw this desk. It's a wild, wild mess. Is this a dry erase? Okay, found a pen. Okay, so here's my whiteboard. So pretend this is my garden. Okay, so let's say it's 10 by 20. And so a lot of people will grow their garden. They'll plant a row of plants like this, and then they'll have a walk path and they'll do another row of plants like this. That is not how I grew my garden, because you're wasting all of this space in between. So how I planted my plants, I'll just use this, was I actually did 4 rows in a 2-foot section like this of carrots, let's say. So this was 4 rows of carrots. And then over here, I would do like 4 rows of beans, let's say. And so what this does is it actually saves you, can everyone see that? It actually saves you a lot of space. And so if you go like a 2-foot section, so 2 foot here, 2 foot here, and 2 foot here, what that does is it makes it a little easier for weeding, actually, because you're just weeding a 2-foot section and you're only weeding a little section, and you're planting your rows about, a couple inches apart, maybe 4 inches apart. And so you're just weeding in between there. And so it'll save a lot of time on weeding because you're just weeding a little section at a time. And then in between here, if you have a lawnmower, I was low till, not no till. So I would actually take the lawnmower and I would mow in between my beds. And so I'm not tilling in between there. You could till in between there, but it does break up your soil, and over tilling isn't necessarily a great thing either. And weeds are called a good thing. They're green manure. And so we would just pick the weeds out of here, throw them in the middle here. They would just compost down, and then next year we would put our bed there and plant in that section. So we were always rotating crops. And so that's a really great way to use the most of, or make the most of your space. And so if you just have a regular garden, and yeah, that's That's a really good system. So, and be creative with the spaces you have. If you have a planter, if you have a Rubbermaid bin, if you have, anything like that, just be really creative. Drainage is really important. If you're going to grow in a Rubbermaid or a pot or something like that, make sure you have drainage in your pot. Again, if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat. So the other thing with doing your plants closer together like that, so follow the spacing on the package. You read your packages. There's lots and lots of information on your seed packages. Follow the seed package and follow the directions. Make sure you're watching like how many days to germinate and things like that, where it likes. There's so much information here, but follow the spacing on your package. And so if it says, this one says, for spacing, doesn't say the spacing on there. Oh yeah, place 3 to 4 seeds in 8 centimeters of 8 centimeters of soil. Sow seeds 5 millimeters, a quarter inch deep. After a few weeks, thin to the strongest plant. So you want one plant. It doesn't say. Oh, space 45 to 60 centimeters apart. So just measure out 45 to 60 centimeters apart within your bed and place your seeds according to that. Well, your plants. So Brussels sprouts you would transplant, your squash you would transplant. So carrots you would seed right in the ground. Yeah, I think I have more on that when I actually do my garden, like my garden coaching. Okay, we talked about cool weather crops, warm weather crops. Don't plant by the calendar, plant by your soil, so like by your soil temperature. So I've done it before where I've planted bean seeds and they didn't even germinate until the soil warmed up enough. Here's a big thing, consistent watering. You want to make sure that you water your plants consistently. What I always tell my clients is that you take a clump of soil and you bunch it up in a ball. If it's got water coming out of it, the soil's too wet. If it crumbles, it's too dry. And if your soil is like Play-Doh, that's the sweet spot. So you want to make sure that you have consistent watering. And I'm just giving you the Coles notes here real quick in a small version of garden. Like the wealth of knowledge is like this, but it just made me think of, with the whole watering thing, blossom end rot, where you have the bad end on your tomato. Blossom end rot is caused by two things. It's either caused by irregular watering or by calcium deficiency in your plants. And so, well, we've got people in the waiting room. Okay, there we go. So, so we do your weeding early on. So I can tell you this much: when you have weeds and they're this tall, they're really easy to pull. When they get big and you're trying to pull them out from in between the plants, that takes a whole lot longer. So what we used to do on the farm is we actually had a little contraption. So we had a hoe. Where did my pen go? Oh my goodness. If you saw this desk, I'd be embarrassed. So it's a good thing you're looking at the rest of the room that's not so messy. Okay. So we had a hoe and it had a big handle like this and it just had a triangle on the bottom. And so we could weed very easily in between the beds that way. Or we took a butter knife and we bent it over like that, and then you can just scrape the weeds off with your little knife. And so if you catch them when they're little, it lets your plants get ahead of the weeds. Now you don't need to weed for perfection. You need to weed for production. And so if you miss a weed here or there, it's not that crazy. Like if you miss a weed here and there, it's not a crazy big deal. Okay, so there's a question here. So think of your questions. If you have questions, I'd love to go through some questions in a few minutes here. Can I go back to the veggies that are the best bang for your buck at some point? Lettuce. Lettuce and greens are the very, 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 it is a Dutch version or a version of a Dutch hoe. So lettuce and spinach and kale, Swiss chard, they're very, very easy plants to grow. I think everyone could grow them no matter where they are. And even if you think about this, even if you didn't have to, you can replant lettuce a couple of times or spinach a couple of times over the course of the season. If you did not have to buy lettuce or spinach, for the summer, can you even imagine how much money you'd save even just off of one little crop and a little planter of lettuce? If you had a little area, even the size of this whiteboard, right? 1 foot by 2 foot, like this is lots of space. You get lots and lots and lots of lettuce, even just by this. So if you had 2 of those and you crop rotated every couple of weeks, yeah, you'd have lettuce or spinach all summer, lots and lots and lots all summer. Make sure it gets lots of water, not too much water, but lots of water. And yeah, you should have lots and lots of spinach and lettuce and greens. Beans are a great bang for your buck. Peas can sometimes be a little hit and miss. Carrots are always a good bang for your buck. Potatoes are a good bang for your buck if you have the space. What else is good bang for your potatoes, carrots, onions, beets, zucchini. Zucchini is one of the easiest things to grow. And if you let them grow a little bit bigger, you just have bigger zucchinis. Spaghetti squash is really easy to grow. That's good. Tomatoes. Does that answer your question? Bang for your buck? Yeah. So I just want to my land was farmland. Okay, here we got some questions coming in here. So my land was farmland a few years ago. So the soil is overused, and amongst all the weeds, I constantly have grains and cereals growing wild. Yeah. What is the best way to get the soil prepped so the weeds and wild grains are more manageable? Yeah, great question. So don't let them go to seed again. That's the top thing. If you can even cut them off, if you have some of that grain pop up, you want to make sure you cut it off before it goes to seed again, or it's just going to continue to seed over and over and over. And if you can do the bed system, I think that would be the most ideal. And then also some weed barrier. So sometimes I would, if any of you have seen any of my videos or anything, I would lay plastic down and I would put drip tape underneath. Now, I don't suggest plastic for each of you because the only reason I could do it is because I actually irrigated everything. But you want to make sure that you have something that the rain and the moisture can get through, but you can use some weed barrier that way. Yeah, and the biggest thing would be if you cut the tops off, they won't go back to seed. So that would be what I suggested. Now, when I moved to this new place, I actually took a big tarp and I tarped off an area, and I killed all the grass and everything under it for a full season before I seeded into it the next year. And then I just tilled it under, and it worked really well. Okay, before we get to more questions, I just want to tell you a little bit about what I do. So I'm an online coach. And so this will be my 3rd season coming up. I actually take on coaching clients for garden coaching, and that's why we're all here. I also do business coaching, but specifically we're here for garden. And so I have an online course that I have. So it's all online training. So this is just a quick little tidbit. My online training is like hours and hours and hours of me just talking and telling you all the little details about greenhouses, about, all the different vegetables, about when to plant, weeds, what to feed them, fertilizer, water, irrigation, all greenhouses, microgreens, all of the things. I also help my clients plan out their yards. So part of their homework is they draw a map of their garden, and then they come to my online group calls. So I do a weekly group call, and my clients come to the group call, and we go over and we plan your garden specifically together, you and me. So it's like gardening with me, but not right in your backyard. You just have access to me to be able to troubleshoot anything. So those weekly calls go from March until June. And then after that, you also have access to me after that to ask any questions in my private online Facebook group. And so if anyone is interested in hearing more about my garden coaching, I'm actually going to put a link in the chat, and you can book a call with me. And so this is just a free jumpstart call where we can chat more about my online program and your goals, and to see if we're a fit for working with one another. So if you're interested, that's there. Yeah, I've had lots of people have a lot of success in their gardens. So now I'll take a few more questions. So would you plant your rows east, west, or north, south, or does it make a difference in the crop? So I would actually plant them north, south, and it doesn't super matter. But the only reason I say north south is because I always ran my greenhouse north south. Because if you think about it, the sun comes up. Sorry, I'm very animated. The sun comes up in the east, and it's more in the south, and you're going to get that sunshine on your crop all day. Now, something to think about though is shade. So if you're running your rows east west, if you have a row of corn, let's say, and it's facing south, and then you try and plant some beans right behind that corn, it's not going to grow because it's going to be shaded. Because you need the sunshine, water, and then carbon monoxide, dioxide, I forget which one plants need to grow. So you don't want it to have your corn shading your beans. And so that's just something to really think about. So I always like my rows north south, because then they get the maximum amount of sunshine all day. Now you could also use your corn as a shade plant and plant your lettuce beside it, because it will it'll shade your lettuce a little bit. And your lettuce is a cool weather crop, and your corn is a warm weather crop. So planting like that would be really good. Don't plant your onions and your beans together. They don't mix very well. So okay, so I live on 40 acres, and I have a patch of raised beds. They have been taken over by, I'm going to shut this so I can see this better. Okay, I like that better. They've been taken over by weeds hugely. How would you suggest I attack them? Should I just cover them all in plastic and cook the beds, or do I dig out the boxes and put in new soil? Okay. I would be choosy about what I put in them. I wouldn't waste that space this year, especially with food prices the way they're going this year. So I wouldn't completely waste that space. I wouldn't plant things like carrots or potatoes or beets or anything in those boxes. I would put things like beans. I would put things like corn, beans, corn, anything that really grows big above the ground, I would put in there. And I would also try and take some like irrigation. So I would dig it all up in the spring, maybe even put a layer of soil on it. And then I would like till it under so you can get it as black soil as possible. Then I would put a weed barrier on, so like landscape fabric that the moisture can get through, and then plant your beans, like cut a little hole in it and plant your beans. So then you're weeding a space like this and not the whole thing. I think that's how I would do it. And what it's going to do is it's that weed barrier or landscape fabric is going to kill anything else underneath it. I think that's what I would do. Because digging it out and putting in new soil is going to be a lot of work too. And those weeds are actually green manure. So it's like compost. You just got to get them under control. Do you know any fruits that could be good to grow? So great question. Oh, carbon dioxide. Thank you. Carbon monoxide is what you get from your car. I don't remember. Anyways, I'm not a scientist, I'm a farmer. Do you know any fruits that could be good to grow? So here's the honest truth. I know this much about vegetables and I know about this much about fruit. And the only reason I know a little bit is just because I can take my knowledge of plants and growing and apply it to fruit. So I'm not that great at fruit. Where do you live? Um, do you live which province do you live in? Or where do you live? Olds, yeah. So I mean, raspberries would be a great option. Um, Raspberry strawberries. You can get Juneberry strawberries and then everbearing strawberries, and I don't remember which is which. Get the plant itself, and one will come back year after, or they'll come back year after year. One will produce the first year, and then one will only produce the second year. So strawberries and raspberries would be really easy in Olds. Yeah, blueberries in Saskatoon. Saskatoon bushes grow really well here in Alberta as well. Blueberries, I don't know a ton about them, just being really honest. Again, fruit is not my strength. Vegetables are my strength because I mostly focused on vegetables. So, are there any more questions? I love answering questions. I got a few minutes for a couple more questions. Even if someone wants to unmute. What about planting around trees? Oh yeah. Are there any good vegetables to plant around trees like crab apples? So you can plant under trees. Now, the hard thing with trees, and I've seen it before where someone will have a big tree line and then they'll say like the soil is just like powder and nothing grows and it's like there's no moisture in it. And what it is the big trees are sucking all the moisture and nutrients out of that soil. And so planting near trees is a little bit tricky because the trees will take the moisture. What about one tree? One tree is not bad. So you can use that to your advantage and plant your cool weather crops underneath your trees to get the shade. So your lettuces and your greens would be a great thing to plant underneath a set of trees. And lettuces and greens, spinaches, any of your leafy greens, they don't actually take much nutrients. Corn is a big nutrient feeder and sucker, same thing with beans, whereas lettuce really takes hardly any nutrients at all. So yeah, blueberries are tough to grow here, but better in BC. Okay. I planted some cherry bushes last year. All the fruit questions, and I don't know a lot about fruit. Some cherry bushes last year. There were some well-researched varieties. Oh, you're educating us, Roger. Thank you. Some well-researched varieties from U of S and work well in our Alberta climate. Romance series available at most retailers. Perfect. Um, yeah, there's DNA gardens somewhere here in Alberta, and they have success with fruit trees. I know my in-laws or my ex-in-laws, they always had Saskatoon bushes. Saskatoons grow really well. Strawberry farms are big or popular. Raspberries are good. But yeah, crab apples, some apple varieties, some pear varieties I think actually grow here as well. So perfect. So, okay, do we have more questions? And if anyone's interested, book a call with me and we can chat about your space and see how I can directly help you with the coaching one-on-one, or it's not one-on-one, it's group-on-one, but it's helping you with your specific space. You mentioned months earlier. Do you use chemical to fight pests or just use natural plants to keep pests under control? So when I had my farm, I grew without pesticide unless certified organic product is used. So I was mentioning earlier about the brassicas. So the brassica family is your cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kale. And so if you've ever seen those little white butterflies, they are not cute at all. And so you have a couple of options when it comes to the brassicas and those butterflies. If you have brassicas, you're going to have cabbage loopers. And so you can either use the full-on pesticide, so it's like a dust or a powder, or you can use a product called Diapel, Diapel, and it's a organic material or organic spray. That's what I used on my brassicas, and I sprayed them every time it rained. And it's a bacteria, so when the worm eats the bacteria, the worm will die. You can take a big net, and when you transplant your brassicas out, you put the big net over top, and you net them in. Make sure there's no holes in it, and you can net them in that way. Or the fourth one is my little joke. Or you can eat the worms. So you've got cabbage with worms, and you can eat the bugs. No extra cost for the proteins. So yeah. So I tend to use more natural or organic type methods, but yeah, those cabbage, the brassicas are the hardest thing to grow. Flea beetle. I've also struggled with flea beetle here in Olds here the last 2 years in my brassicas. Okay. Do I cover greens with the netting to protect them from the bunnies? Ooh, bunnies would be terrible. I'm not even sure what I would do for bunnies. So I'm gonna bring out the farm girl in me and say a gun. Um, yeah, I think with bunnies, you might have to put some, netting or mesh over top of your beds in order to like not let them in. So bunnies would be a really tricky one. Squirrels sometimes are the tricky animals in the city as well. Deer, if you live out west, or near deer country, you'll have to put up deer fence, because those are tricky. How do you prevent mildew on your zucchinis? So powdery mildew is it comes on more and more and more with humidity. So the drier the climate is, the less humidity. I used to deal with powdery mildew in my greenhouse, and I would actually burn sulfur. So I burned sulfur, and just the sulfur in the air actually got the mildew to go away. But yeah, mildew is because of humidity. And so, especially if you have them in the greenhouse, your humidity would be too high. Outside, yeah, you just water them off and let them dry in the sun, and just try not to keep them too wet or too humid. We live in town. We have bunnies that eat our fallen crab apples. So just wondering for planting around the tree. Yeah, bunnies are going to be pretty brutal. If there's a way that you can just plant like up in planter boxes or something where the bunnies can't get to it, maybe that's maybe what I would do. Or build a box and then put some kind of lid or cover on it. But make sure it's just got ventilation. You can't if it gets too hot or too humid, that's not good for your plants. Yeah. Okay, I probably have time for like 2 or 3 more questions if you've got them, or if does anyone want to unmute and ask a question? If there's anyone brave. How often do you water? As often as it needs it. So, like I said earlier, I do the water test. So I take my soil, I grab a bunch of it, and I bunch it in a bunch like this. If it's powder, if it crumbles, your soil's too dry and they need a drink of water. If it has like water in it, then your soil's wet. They do not need more water. They have to like dry out a little bit. And if it's like Play-Doh, like if you bunch it and it's like Play-Doh, that's the sweet spot. So you just have to kind of take a guess, and it's based on the weather. It's based on, did we have rain? Did we not have rain? Things like that. Any tips or recommendations on rain barrels? So here's something to think about. So especially if you live in the country, sometimes your well water is not good for your plants. When I had my farm, my well water was way too high in sodium, and it did not work well for my plants. And so I had to use the water out of my dugout, which had less sodium in it. And so, so just sometimes well water can be tricky. But for rain barrels, I've got several rain barrels. I've got some water totes, and then I just have a submersible pump and a garden hose, and I submerge the pump and I just water off with my garden hose. And so your rain and your rainwater is the best water. So even on my farm, when I had 20 acres, we had irrigation, but irrigation is good, but it's not as good as that real soaking rain that we get. And so hopefully we get some good rain in May and June, and that really will keep your garden watered. So yeah, your rainwater is your best water. Okay. Any more questions? Ashley, you got lots of questions. I love it.
I'm a lazy
Perfect.
gardener.
Pardon?
I'm a lazy gardener.
Okay. So tell
I
me
let
about that.
my stuff seed and then come back on its own. The stuff
Oh,
that
okay.
does.
So like, yeah,
Yeah.
dill, lettuce,
So
cilantro.
yeah. Sometimes squash, not very often.
Yeah,
Sometimes tomatoes, not very often, but like beets, lettuces, cilantro,
yeah,
like you said.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
it doesn't make it organized, but it makes my
No,
life easier.
yeah,
But I'm also
yeah,
in town and I'm in a rental
yeah.
and I'm not allowed to dig in the ground. So everything I do is in like raised
Oh,
beds. And
yeah,
the one I made, it's 6 feet long by like
yeah.
2 or 3 feet wide, but it's like 3 feet deep. So I made it really
Okay.
deep. So to try to like
Yeah,
protect roots more.
yeah, yeah. No, that's
Um,
perfect.
so that makes it
Amazing.
challenging because they
Yeah.
won't let me dig the grass, but I can build on the grass, but I just can't dig the grass.
Right. And so
Hmm.
I love that. So you put your beds in, and then the other thing is like along your house and just in different planters and any container. I mean, go to the thrift store. If you're on a budget, go to the thrift store and pick up extra containers. And you're in Calgary?
I'm south of Edmonton.
Oh, South Edmonton, yeah. So just pick up extra containers and throw things into containers as long as you've got some drainage and you've got yourself some food production. I love it.
For
Love it.
if you're gonna do like Tupperwares, do you recommend like drilling holes in the bottom then?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's what I mean by drainage. Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to, yeah, you can't have things sitting in water. That's going to wreck your roots.
Yeah.
Like hydroponics or things like that is okay, but you've always got your water running and moving, and you've got oxygen in the water. But yeah, so make sure you have some drainage in your big totes or tubs or whatever you're going to grow in. And yeah, try growing even more. Try growing some pole beans along your house. Put up a string. Tomato plants are really good. Use your vertical space and just, yeah, grow as much as you can in the limited space you have, being as creative as possible. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. People always think, oh, I have to build these big wood beds and things like that. They're kind of pricey, but if you're just creative, yeah, I think that's the way to go.
Okay. Perfect.
So
Thank you.
yeah, of course. Okay, we've got a few more people joining. Um, so we will be reaching out as we have a bunch of things going on here, and I need your guidance with this. This has been great. Thanks, Andrea. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming to the call. Perfect. So did I miss any more questions in the chat? Any tips or recommendations for rain barrels? Yeah, we've got that. Ashley, rain barrels is something because you're in a rental, you can always take with you. So yeah. So thanks so much for joining me this evening. I love this. I love teaching. This was just scratching the surface of, all the experience and knowledge in my brains. But yeah, it gave you hopefully a few tips and tricks to get some food production this year. And so yeah, really enjoy this. I love it. I love teaching. I love helping people with their food production. And I'll leave you with this story. I had a client 2 years ago and she had her kids involved, and her kids were helping her in the garden and they were planting different things. And I'll never forget this story. The little girl, like, they had some company over to their house, and the little girl pulled some carrots out of the soil and pulled them up. And she said, I grew these. And so I just think, man, that's the way it should be. Every child should know that those carrots come out of the soil and you wipe them off on your pants and you just eat them like that. And, I think that we need to get back to that. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, teaching people how to grow food. So thanks so much for joining me tonight, and we'll carry on from there. So thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone.